And what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Designated Players, an MLS podcast. And we are back with MLS History Retold. And boy, oh boy, do we have some fun ones for you today. First, we will take you back to the transition period between the New York, New Jersey Metro Stars and the New York Red Bulls, a team that wanted to be associated with big names and great vibes. And they started it off with a bang, hiring Rihanna, yes, that Rihanna, to perform in the parking lot of Giant Stadium before the first ever game of the RBNY era. Then it's back to the beginning of the Philadelphia Union, where our story will dive into how the Union came to be on the backs of their supporters, the Sons of Ben, who existed even before the club did and mandated that MLS come to Philly. I'm Andrew, that's Connor, and this is MLS History Retold. Play the cool music.
I really want to know when you say yes, that Rihanna, who is the other Rihanna that you think people are going to get confused with?
Listen, I understand that you're not as cultured as I am, but use the internet, Google it.
Okay, I will do it right now.
Good.
Find this
While you do
mysterious
that, let's
Rihanna.
chat scarf of the week. And I have a great one to start with. It is my combo Red Bull and Metro Scarf, the Metro Star Scarf, Metro Scarf, which is great because we're in that transition period between the Metro and the Red Bull. What are you rocking?
Well, I'm currently looking for whoever this mysterious other Rihanna is.
All right, listen,
Not
let's
finding it,
let's let's
but
go ahead and all right, maybe you're not on the side of the internet I'm on, and that's okay.
that's probably for the best. I don't think I want to be on your side of the internet. Um, we're talking about the Union, so I've got the Union scarf. No meat in the middle, but it's a goodie.
Yes, indeed. Well, you want to talk about Goody? There are some very good concerts in the backlogs of history, if you will. But I want you to imagine this. You're one of the few original fans of the New York, New Jersey Metro Stars. The classic red and black striped kit, playing games at Giant Stadium, the football field still lining the pitch week after week. And then all of a sudden the news breaks. Energy drink super conglomerate Red Bull has purchased your team and are changing it all. New logo, new kits, new team name, and eventually a new place to call home. They had just picked up a team in the Austrian Bundesliga and would go on to pick up two other sides in Germany and Brazil. Red Bull, being one of the most wealthy ownership groups at the time, had deep pockets and were willing to bring in big names and flaunt the cash. In the years that would follow, the likes of Thierry Henry, Tim Cahill, Peggy Leandula, Frank Ross, and that's it. We won't talk about any more. Would find their way into the side, and you would be a top three team in payroll year after year, and the envy of every other fan and club in the league. That sounds pretty good, right? And it was because between 2006 and 2018, Red Bull would only miss the playoffs once, take home three supporter shields, and make two MLS Cups. They'd bring in the biggest names in the leagues, bar perhaps the LA Galaxy, and fans would flock in droves to see them play. Red Bull bought the team and had an idea on how they wanted to market it, even in the biggest city in the world. And now they just needed something to kick off the big event. Cue Robin Rihanna Fenty, better known as just Rihanna. The list of accolades for this superstar is longer than the accolades of every MLS club combined. Just from Wikipedia, she has 479 nominations for various awards like MTV, Billboard, and AMA, winning 184 times. As of 2018, which is just 6 years ago, she has sold over 250 million records. She's received the Icon Award, has six Guinness World Records, including one for digital single sales, topping 58 million as of 2012, which is over 12 years ago. You can imagine how much that has grown since. She has 14 number one singles, a mainstream top 40 artist of the past 20 years. The list goes on. And now, as much as we'd like to continue to talk about Rihanna, we should talk about the Red Bull, the most important part of the story, because it, it's the Red Bull. I mean, come on. Looking to spice things up and announce their new brand to the New York metro area, they called up Rihanna's people and asked her to play a concert before their first ever game as Red Bull New York. At the time, she had only released a single album called Music of the Sun, which included hit songs, most notably of which was Ponder Replay, which was but just 2 days out from releasing her second album, A Girl Like Me. A Girl Like Me, as Connor, you may remember, is where some of her more memorable work came from in the 2010 era, including songs like SOS, Unfaithful, and If It's Lovin' You Want. So here comes the relatively unknown music artist with a bright future to play a few songs at the first ever Red Bull New York game. At the south tower of a place called Red Bull Energy Station, as well as perform the national anthem of that game. Which, when it really came down to it, it was just the parking lot outside the stadium with some fancy decorations for the occasion. She would then go on to sing the national anthem while Shakira and Wyclef Jean, two stars in their own right, performed separately at halftime. The marketing ploy worked for the day, but not so much for the year. All of this hype saw 35,000 fans flock to Giant Stadium in April, which was the second largest crowd that they got that year. However, it did heavily skew off of their average of just over 10,000 a game for the rest of the season. Red Bull will go on to sneak into the playoffs in the last spot available. They won the winning get-in game against Kansas City on the last day of the season, but then they would go on to lose to DC in the home and home two-legged series to see their season end early. Now, I know that this wasn't a super long story with any bit of, super in-depth about what the concert was because it wasn't very well covered. However, there is anything that you can take from this story. The uber famous, highly talented, and incredible career of Rihanna is incomparable to anyone else. And she owes her thanks to a small parking lot concert backed by the Red Bull. You're welcome, Rihanna.
It's pretty bold to be saying that Rihanna should be thanking Red Bull, considering, I can't even find Red Bull on her Wikipedia page. So
Well, that's
this
because
is
you can't take everything from Wikipedia. You know this. Wikipedia is not a reliable source.
that's just what they want you to think, but they cite their sources. So I could go to the sources that they call reliable. And also, shame on you for thinking that I would not know Rihanna songs. Of course I do. Maybe not from those early albums, but I know Rihanna songs.
Well, it's funny because I am not the Rihanna aficionado that many think I am, which,
That's true. We do all think you of you as a Rihanna aficionado.
yeah, well, I mean, listen, people just think that I know everything. They look at me like, oh, that guy knows stuff.
Debatable. Debatable. All right, well, you know what's not debatable? How good of a story this Sons of Ben story is. So let's talk here about the Sons of Ben. So imagine you are someone who is a massive supporter of a sports team to the point where you're making merchandise and trying to convince many other people to join you in rooting for this team. Weirdly, though, people look at you like you're insane and tell you that you're crazy. I mean, why is that? Well, that's because this team that you're supporting doesn't exist. That's what happened with the Sons of Ben, a Philadelphia Union supporters group that existed for longer than the team has existed. And today we're going to tell you about their story. So the story will start when the Sons of Ben wasn't even an idea yet. As much as it pains me to say, as a New York sports fan myself, Philadelphia is a city known for their sports love and also for being a-holes, if we're being honest. But that's besides the point. In the late 2000s, they already had a thriving sports scene with four major sports teams in the area: the Eagles for football, the 76ers for basketball, the Flyers for hockey, and the Phillies for baseball. Considering all of that, it was very easy for soccer to get pushed to the wayside with so many other options to gravitate towards. However, that was not the case for all. And those same people began to find one another online in different soccer forums and communities. One of the major things all of these people bonded over was not having a voice in the soccer community. And one day they decided they were going to change that. They decided they were going to meet up at McGillen's Old Ale House in Philly. And in that ale house is where the Sons of Ben was born to try and make their voice heard about wanting to bring a MLS franchise to Philadelphia. The name of the supporters group, the Sons of Ben, is paying homage to Benjamin Franklin, who I hopefully don't have to tell you about, but is a major figure in the history of Philadelphia. They continued to build the brand by making a logo as well, with a lot of references to Ben and also the city of Philly in the logo. To top it all off, as if it were fate, the URL for Sons of Ben actually became available just 2 days before this project began to take off. The group started small with maybe about 8 to 10 people who were very dedicated to growing both this group and getting more attention on the city getting an MLS side. But despite the small numbers, they put in a big effort. This included them spending their own money to make scarves, shirts, magnets, and more to help market the group and get people involved. In the documentary, they talked about specifically for the magnets how they would give two out to each person they marketed towards. That way, they can keep one for themselves and they could use the other one in a more public space to help get even more eyes on the group. They were super dedicated to getting their name out as much as possible. So they would show up to event after event and continue to cheer for this team that did not exist. Some of the events included going to New York soccer games and even showing up to the MLS draft. Sons of Ben was able to catch some fortunate breaks when it came to their marketing strategies. One of which was being interviewed on live TV at an indoor soccer match in Philadelphia. In fact, there was even one supporter in the documentary who said they heard about Sons of Ben through seeing them on TV. However, there was still low turnout to Sons of Ben events, despite all their money and their efforts thus far. Another one of their big breaks came with spotlights in some big sports magazines, such as Sports Illustrated and 442, the latter of which caught the attention of Nick Sakovic, who would later become a very crucial part of the process of getting a team to Philly. Another one of their major breaks was their influence at the 2007 MLS Cup final in DC. They showed up to the Cup with about 90 people, even though they had no team nor rooting interest in this final. Their only mission was to make themselves heard. Fortunate for them, when the group arrived, DC security at the Cup wanted a parade of different teams coming through, different team supporters. So someone from the group went up to security and said that they were there for the Philadelphia team. Security, having no idea what teams were actually in the league, went along with it. And so the Sons of Ben got to march in with the other fans while they were chanting for a non existent team. Eventually, they made their way to the stands where they did not stop chanting for Philadelphia, to the point where the other team's supporters in the stands began to give them dirty looks and throw harsh words their direction. But Sons of Ben was not deterred. In the documentary, they show a clip of from the national TV broadcast, and at one point, when Houston is going to take a corner, in the stands you could see a sea of light blue, where the Sons of Ben were making their presence known. And again, Nick Sakovic took notice of them. Eventually, all of this noise began to pay off as the county pledged to offer 30 million in bonds to help raise money for a soccer-specific stadium to be built for a potential Philadelphia team. There was a big looming question when this news broke, though. Where were they going to build the stadium? For those unfamiliar with the other Philadelphia sports, most, if not all, of their stadiums are right next to each other in one location. So it would definitely be very different for them to have to move somewhere else. Or were they going to group them in with the other stadiums? Well, one of the rumored areas was Chester, which at the time was known for its high crime rates. So many people were questioning, why was this one of the rumored places? This may stop people from wanting to travel to games. And also considering the fact that it's 15 miles outside of Philadelphia. Well, the Sons of Ben were just happy they'd have anywhere they could watch a team play. And they even embraced the stadium being in Chester by beginning a charity called Help Kick Hunger, where they would raise money and collect food to help feed those in Chester. And while they were able to check off the box of finding a place to play, they did have another major issue. And it was that there was a $47 million gap in funding for the new stadium. And without that money, they weren't going to be able to start building it. One of the places that people turned to potentially get this money from was the state of Pennsylvania. So Sons of Ben did what they do best, and they made their voice heard. They traveled around everywhere in Philly, collecting signatures of support for the team to help show that there was a group of people that would support this project. Eventually, they were able to turn over a petition signed by 7,000 people to Governor Pileggi to try and get the extra funding that they needed, and ultimately, it did work. And not only did it work, but the governor says in the documentary that the Sons of Ben's existence was a major factor in showing that there would be a strong support for a team here, which gave him more assurance to be able to provide this money. So, following this, Nick eventually sits down with the governor to talk about beginning the construction for the stadium. And the governor only agreed to it if it were going to be in a struggling area. That way, it could potentially be a way to bring life back into the area, which lent more backing to Chester being the location for the stadium. The last hurdle before construction could presumably begin was that the governor would only give the green light if MLS agreed to add Philly as an expansion team, which created what had to feel like the longest waiting game of all time for Sons of Ben members. The rumor was that MLS was going to add 3 expansion sides, and in 2008 and 2009, San Jose and Seattle respectively joined the league, leaving only one place left. Otherwise, everything they worked so hard for might be dead. The biggest players for that 2010 spot were Philly and St. Louis, And St. Louis was looking like a very formidable threat to take this spot. And they even copied the Sons of Ben by making their own supporters group for a non-existent team. Then one day, Brian James, head of Sons of Ben, gets a call from Nick, and he asks him and the Sons of Ben to meet him at a bar so he could deliver some important news. And it was at this bar that he essentially drops the news that Philly is going to be the 16th team to join Major League Soccer. The announcement was held in a work building in Chester on February 28th, 2008, where Daddy Don dropped the official news that Philly would be joining the league in 2010. And while he's making the announcement, over to his right is a group of Sons of Ben members in all of their gear with smiles ear to ear, finally seeing the fruits of their labor. Right when everything was at its highest point for Philly and the Sons of Ben, of course, there had to be one last hurdle in the shape of the economic recession. When the recession hit, there were a lot of questions and a lot of concern about whether they would actually have the money needed to start the construction of the stadium. Add to this the fact that there was a rumor that Don was meeting with the Barcelona owners about a potential team in Miami. And now you've got a lot of people in Philly nervous about their expansion ticket potentially being taken away. Another major impact of the recession had to do with the revitalization plan for the city of Chester. Originally, with the plans to build the new stadium, there were also plans to build new restaurants, create more jobs, and also completely change the whole waterfront. But according to the documentary, this never happened due to the recession, which was a major letdown and quite frankly, a betrayal to the people of Chester, who were hoping this could be a huge moment to turn things around and get people in the city to get themselves on the right track. Instead, now the city is stuck in the cycle of poverty and violence, while others who were better off get to go to the new stadium for the day and then leave right after without actually being able to support the surrounding area. Well, 6 months roll by, and the markets begin to open up again. And with it begins the construction of the stadium, thanks to a big push by Nick. And on June 27th, 2010, the Philadelphia Union, a professional soccer team for the city of Philadelphia, finally plays its first game, with the forever faithful Sons of Ben in the stadium cheering for a real team, their real team.
Unfortunately, this is clearly a fake story because, as you know, in MLS, there are no real teams or real fans because they're all consumers. All they do is they're it's all money, 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 and this can't have happened because that only happens in Europe, isn't that right?
Listen, there are real teams in MLS except for in Dallas. That's the only place that does not have a real team.
Oh man, listen, these are the ones that I love the most, right? The idea that people will walk around with this preconceived notion of like, yeah, no, MLS doesn't have real fans. They're all, they see one clip of a guy doing a chant and they're like, oh yeah, those are all fake fans. They don't really know what's going on. Nobody knows this background story. The Sons of Ben are so brilliant in what they've done and how they've grown the game in Philly. It's magnificent. It's really, and I had no idea how much competition they were up against when it came to other clubs too. I didn't realize St. Louis had a big. I mean, I had assumed that there were others there, but I didn't realize how, I guess, close it was to actually not happening.
A lot of I mean there were tons of moments where it was really close to
Yeah.
not happening, but they even mentioned too in that last year in 2010 when they were kind of going through that expansion phase, even though it was kind of like mainly down to Philly and St. Louis, there were like at least another 9 or 10
Hmm.
locations that were up for expansion as well. So there was a ton of competition. Like it could have easily went somewhere else. I mean, think about it. Like St. Louis just recently joined the league. If certain things go in other directions, maybe St. Louis is the one joining in 2010, and maybe Philly doesn't join until like the last year or so.
Yeah, or Philly might not even be there at all because it's considered, with the stadium issues that they were having, it might have been yeah, maybe not. Maybe we go somewhere else with this.
I like to think eventually they would bring Philly in. I mean, Philly is like a really big sports city, so I would imagine eventually they would want to throw a team there. I feel like it would make sense, but it definitely would have delayed it a lot longer. And who knows? I mean, maybe there was a lot of like a lot of issues that the Sons of Ben was going through as well, with like just kind of like running out of money, running out of steam by the end of this. Like if the project collapsed, there's a chance that the Sons of Ben might have collapsed as well too. So they really needed it to go through at this time, and fortunately for them and for Philadelphia, it did.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we hope everybody enjoyed those stories. Like I said, these are some of my favorites. I like the games. I like the big comebacks and things like that. But the origin stories are really the ones that hit it for me. So, the origin of the Sons of Ben and Philadelphia and the origins of Rihanna's career all tied into MLS in one way or another. So we hope you enjoy that. Thanks so much for listening, and make sure you stick around for our next MLS history, which is going to be very, very fun. We're going back to Philly to talk about Sebastian Letou and his hat trick in the first ever home match. And then we're talking about the massive preseason result for the Kansas City Wizards against Manchester United back in 2010s. Thanks so much again for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time on the next episode of the Designated Players and MLS Podcast. See ya.